What's up guys, today on Dirt Lifestyle we're going to be doing something that's a little more advanced. A lot of the content that I produce will be entry-level stuff, but I love to do advanced builds and this is definitely one of them. Engine swaps are not easy and they are not something that is for the faint of heart. You will have to think on your feet, you will have to troubleshoot a lot of different problems throughout the way, and you're going to be building a ton of stuff from scratch. It doesn't matter if you buy something that says the word kit in it, you will still be fabricating in some way or another. When I did the TDI swap in my Jeep TJ, I had a whole lot of naysayers along the way, and it's understandable. It's a 1.9 liter engine, and a lot of people wouldn't think that it would have the kind of power you would need to turn a 40 very well. But a lot of people overlook the fact that diesel actually has more energy in it as a fuel source than gasoline. So you can take advantage of this, and you can extract more energy out of the same amount of fuel, making it to where a smaller engine can perform like a larger engine, especially when you add lots of boost. In this series, we're going to cover everything involved in an engine swap with three main goals in mind. Goal number one is to make this watchable by everybody. So I want to make this watchable by someone who's really advanced and can enjoy it, and also make it watchable by someone who's a beginner and this is a brand new world for them. Goal number two, a lot of the information that I'm going to cover in this, I'm going to relate to other builds and I'm going to compare to other swaps, LS swaps, who knows, maybe 4.6 stroker swaps, things like that, because I want to try to keep things in perspective while we're talking about the build. And our third goal is going to be to make sure that if you watch this and you want to swap a TDI, this will have all the information that you need in order to do it yourself. The engine we're using for this series is a BHW engine code. For those of you who are beginners, different automotive manufacturers will have sub-engine codes that will correlate with different generations of engines in the same family of engine. If you're swapping an LS from GM, you'd see an LM7, you'd see L59, different subcodes that basically are all under the same family tree of engines. Volkswagen has their system set up the same way. AHU, ALH, 1Z, these are all early engine codes of the same engine family, and they're basically just early direct injected diesels with the TDI designation. Here in the United States in 2004, they started using common rail. These are a whole different subset of engine designations. These new common rail engines feature a quieter sound, a smoother running idle, and a whole bunch of other little upgrades that we'll go over later in the video. The Jettas and Golfs came with an engine that is horizontally mounted, meaning it goes from left to right. This engine is longitudinally mounted, meaning that all the drive accessories and everything are right on the front of the engine in the same orientation as you see Jeeps, you know, that Land Rover over there, all kinds of stuff like that. Anything that's 4x4, it seems like they always mount them in this orientation. This is very attractive to me because I think it's going to make it a little bit easier to convert the Volkswagen accessories to work on the vehicle. To be completely honest, this engine does not have a home yet. I love the idea of putting in the Land Rover, but this BHW swap is starting earlier than I expected it to. I have been wanting to do a BHW swap into something and was planning on doing it later, like after I get done with the J10. That's still the plan. I did a local meet and greet. A guy showed up, we were talking. I told him I was interested in doing a BHW swap in the future. He said, dude, I have a car, it's in my yard. If you come get it, it's yours. So no one's gonna turn that down, right? I went and got it. And to keep the Passat from sitting in my yard, we're going to pull the engine, we're going to pull all the wiring, everything we need out of the car, we're going to get rid of the car, and then we're going to slowly build this series. Once I'm done with the J10, I should probably have a good idea as to where this thing is going to go. I'm leaning Land Rover right now, but there could be some other things in the works, and it might go into a new project after the J10 is all completed. I'm sure some of you are wondering, do I really need an entire car in order to get a TDI engine? You definitely don't. You can buy just the engine, just try to get the wiring and stuff with it, and hopefully you can find someone who's either trustworthy or can give you some basic history of the engine and confirm that it is in working order. If you have the room to store it and you can find a good deal on one, I would absolutely recommend getting a donor car. You'll have full access to all the wiring, you can look in the coolant to make sure there's no oil in it, you can look in the oil to make sure there's no coolant in it, and you can inspect this thing over. If it runs, you're in luck. That means that you can actually test to make sure it works. You can hear it function before you buy it. If you find a running car, one thing I would recommend before you go and check it out would be to ask the owner not to start it before you get there. Sometimes people will start cars and warm them up so that it fires right up on the first start, and it sounds like it's really healthy. But the way an engine starts when it's cold can tell you a lot about an engine. If you go and you feel the block, you feel the valve cover, and it's cold because the owner has not started it, and you go and fire it right up, you know that it has compression, you know it has decent injectors, you know the glow plugs are functioning. If it doesn't fire right up, that's not the end of the world. It could just be a poor spray pattern from the injectors, it could be a faulty glow plug, who knows. You're just gonna have to weigh the pros and cons of how good of a deal are you getting on the donor car versus how many different issues are you noticing whenever you're inspecting it. If you find a donor car that is both affordable and drivable, then you are in luck. You found the holy grail. That is obviously what you want, ideally, because you have more functioning parts to sell and you can drive it. You can actually see how the engine operates in the real world. This 2005 Passat is a donor car because it has a bad transmission. Totally normal for an automatic Passat of this era. The beautiful part about having a donor car is you've got all this money on it. So the wheels and tires don't have a whole lot of tread on this thing, but people look for random wheels because they want to put snow tires on them or whatever. So if I get 40 bucks for the wheels and tires, that's 40 bucks towards the build that I didn't have before. If you just go buy an engine, you don't have that. I already put this on Craigslist, so I have people that are asking about the fenders. I've got people that are asking about different odds and ends, a door. These various parts are worth money, and so it's worth taking the time to remove them carefully because you might be able to make the money back that you spent on the car. Remember, you have a whole bunch of vacuums, you've got sensors, you've got all this stuff that has a home, and you don't want to be figuring out where it all went. It's easier to figure out where it goes now before you pull the motor. So before I get too far, I'm gonna start labeling all this stuff just to make sure that whenever it comes time to fish through all this wiring, I know exactly where it all went because it's got a flag on it. It'll tell me where it all went. This vacuum went to the airbox, so I'm just gonna write airbox. This engine has 4 really important sensors that I wanna locate and mark before I tear anything apart. One would be the MAF sensor, M-A-F. The other one would be the MAP sensor, M-A-P. The N75 valve, which is what controls the turbo, and then also the throttle pedal. That's considered a sensor. There's a couple other sensors that are good to have too. Engine coolant temp, clearly an important one. So you want to label all that stuff. Those are a little bit more obvious, but to get the MAF sensor, MAP sensor, those things out of the way and labeled, just make sure you keep track of them. Make sure you take really good care of them whenever you're disconnecting them. I spray a little WD-40 in the connector before I start wiggling it off, just to make sure it comes off clean and I don't have a broken part that I need to go find. Some of these sensors I just named are negotiable, and that goes for you LS guys too. This is all between you and your tuner. You tell them what your needs are, you can shoot them an email, you can say, hey, I want this to be bare bones, just enough to get it running, and they will tell you what sensors you absolutely have to have. I keep the mass airflow sensor. You don't have to have it, but I've always felt like it gives me a little extra throttle response. It's the same cost. It doesn't make a difference, so I keep the mass airflow sensor. Sometimes when you're pulling an engine from a donor vehicle, you will not be able to separate the transmission from the engine inside the vehicle, and this is one of those times. So I just pulled the whole thing out in one chunk, not too bad. I just kept unbolting bolts until I felt the engine get loose and then dropped it out of the bottom. And then I disconnected all of my electrical at the ECU. Why have TDI swaps gotten so popular over the last couple of years? I'm sure a bunch of you are wondering that. And that's because these engines are super lightweight and they're super small compared to everything else that makes a similar power. The number that I see getting tossed around a lot these days is about 325 pounds fully dressed. That's pretty lightweight for something that's capable of, 300 and some odd foot-pounds of torque with just a tune and a couple of small upgrades. When I swapped the 4.0 out of my Jeep TJ, I lost about 250 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's actually a ton. And it's all on the front end of the vehicle, so it handled noticeably different after it was all completed. TDIs are also notoriously reliable. I've had 7 Volkswagen diesels all told. My favorite one was probably my 2006 Volkswagen Jetta. It got about 50 miles per gallon, so they're very fuel efficient. And we had a 2003 Volkswagen Beetle that took us to San Francisco from Seattle on 1 tank of fuel. I hypermiled it and we got 65 miles per gallon. That was the best trip we ever got out of that car. The reason I like to swap TDIs is the power. These things are vastly underrated in power. My Jeep is barely modified and it routinely beats Jeeps in a drag race that have V6s and V8s. The only mods I have done to mine so far are a slightly bigger turbo and some injectors. For comparison, the turbo that's in it now is rated for 180 horsepower and the one that came with it was only rated for 150. And if you guys don't mind, I need to take a second to get a picture that is usable as a thumbnail. And if you're watching this video, that means it worked. So how's my Jeep faster than other Jeeps that have engines that are 2 or 3 times larger? The key is low-end torque. I want to prove it to you with this video. This is just a friendly drag race between me and a few of my YouTube buddies. We have a Jeep 4.0, we have a Jeep 3.8, and we have a Henny 6.1. My Jeep is only good for about 180 horsepower, but it makes between 330 and 350 foot-pounds of torque. So it has the same horsepower as a Jeep 4.0 with the same torque as a V8. The real secret to diesel power is that it makes it at low RPM. My Jeep makes peak torque at about 1900 RPM. It idles at 900, so that means it goes from idle to peak torque, V8 torque, in 1000 RPM. When you're turning big heavy tires like a 40, horsepower becomes almost irrelevant. Almost irrelevant, not irrelevant, but very close. You want torque to turn big tires. Horsepower doesn't do a whole lot to help you. There's a reason why all the heaviest loads in the world are moved by diesel trains, diesel ships, and diesel trucks. I want to make it super clear that I did not build this Jeep for speed. This thing is built for fun. So I raced only because there are so many keyboard warriors out there that will tell you a TDI is not a viable option for a vehicle with big tires. I raced to show you that it is just as viable as a V8, a V6, anything else. It's more viable than the 4-liter that I took out of that Jeep because that thing was a dog as soon as I put 40s on it. But once I ramped that torque number up, the thing actually moves really well. That is a messy shop. I have a lot of work ahead of me to clean this thing up and get ready for the next video. So this one is over. If you like what you saw and you want to see more like it, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. If you want to get Dirt Lifestyle t-shirts, hats, things like that, or use our Amazon affiliate link, you go to thedirtlifestyle.com. And if you want to follow me on social media, I'm at Dirt Lifestyle Nate. We'll see you next time.